Adriana Castillo, an undocumented mother, lived in fear of her controlling husband. But with courage, her son's art, and an unexpected ally, she turned her darkest moment into a triumph you won't believe. Before we dive into the story, let's do what Sleepless in Seattle taught us. Share where you're listening from. Comment below. The alarm pierces the darkness at 4:30 a.m., its harsh buzz cutting through Adriana's fitful sleep. She silences it quickly, ears straining for any sound from the bedroom next door where Carlos sleeps. The mattress springs creak as she eases herself up, each movement calculated to minimize noise. Dawn hasn't yet touched the grimy windows of their one-bedroom apartment, but Adriana moves with practiced precision through the darkness. The kitchen light flickers twice before settling into a dim yellow glow that catches the peeling wallpaper. Adriana pulls eggs from the near-empty refrigerator, the cool air raising goosebumps on her arms. The pan's handle is loose again. She'll need to tighten it soon. Add it to the endless list of repairs they can't afford. Oil sizzles as she cracks eggs into the pan, the familiar rhythm of morning preparations settling into her bones. Diego shuffles into the kitchen, his dark hair mussed from sleep, clutching his beloved sketchbook. The sight of him squeezes Adriana's heart. He looks so much younger than 10 in his oversized Spider-Man pajamas, yet his eyes hold a wariness that no child should know. "Buenos dias, mijo," she whispers, sliding a plate of eggs and slightly burned toast across their scratched kitchen table. The traffic outside their window provides a constant backdrop of horns and engines, the morning rush already building. Diego picks at his food with one hand while sketching with the other. Adriana catches glimpses of bold lines and dramatic poses, another superhero taking shape under his careful strokes. "What are you drawing today?" His eyes light up, the first real spark she's seen this morning. "She's a new hero, Mama. Like you, she has super strength to protect her family from bad guys." His pencil moves faster, adding details to the cape-wearing figure on the page. Adriana's throat tightens at the dark implications behind his art. She studies his face as he draws, noting the shadows under his eyes that match her own. "Your imagination is beautiful, mi amor," she says, running her fingers through his tangled hair. "But remember what Miss Sanchez said about focusing on your schoolwork, too." The walk to school takes them past boarded-up storefronts and overflowing dumpsters. Diego clutches her hand tighter when they pass the corner where teenagers often gather, their hostile stares following mother and son down the block. But his grip loosens as he describes his latest superhero story, his free hand gesturing animatedly. "And then she flies really high, Mama. So high no one can catch her. The bad guys can't touch her family anymore because she's too strong and fast." "Diego." Adriana stops at the school gates, kneeling to meet his eyes. She straightens his collar, buying time to steady her voice. "You know I'll always protect you, right? No superpowers needed." He nods, but his eyes drift to the ground. The morning bell rings, and he hurries inside without looking back. Adriana watches until he disappears through the double doors, her heart heavy with all the things she cannot say. The office building where she cleans towers above her, its gleaming windows reflecting the rising sun. Adriana slips in through the service entrance, trading her worn jacket for the company-issued cleaning uniform. The fabric is rough against her skin, but she's learned to ignore such small discomforts. "You look tired, amiga." Rosa's voice startles her. Her coworker studies her with concern, eyes lingering on the concealer-covered shadows under Adriana's eyes. "I'm fine." Adriana busies herself with the cleaning cart, avoiding Rosa's knowing gaze. "Just staying up late helping Diego with homework." Mentirosa. Rosa's voice drops lower. "I know what Carlos is like. My sister's group, they help women like us. Immigrant women. They could... No." Adriana's hands shake as she arranges bottles of cleaning solution. "I can't risk it. You know that. But... please, Rosa." The words come out sharper than intended. Adriana softens her tone. "I have to think of Diego." Rosa's expression says she wants to argue, but she just squeezes Adriana's shoulder and wheels her cart toward the elevators. Adriana follows her own familiar route, head down as early arriving executives stride past in expensive suits. She's learned to make herself invisible, to fade into the background like a ghost. The morning passes in a blur of repetitive motions, scrubbing floors, emptying trash bins, wiping endless smudges from glass surfaces. Her back aches from bending and lifting. but she pushes through it. Each paycheck means food on the table, clothes for Diego, one more month of relative safety. The library is quiet when Adriana arrives to pick up Diego after school. She finds him at his usual table, surrounded by scattered papers covered in superhero sketches. Miss Sanchez stands nearby, her brow furrowed with concern. Mrs. Castillo. The teacher approaches as Diego hastily gathers his drawings. Could we talk for a moment? Adriana's stomach clenches, but she forces a smile. Of course. Diego's a bright boy, Miss Sanchez begins, glancing at him. But lately he seems distracted. His last few assignments were incomplete, and during recess he sits alone drawing rather than playing with other children. Is everything okay at home? Diego's head snaps up, his eyes wide with panic. Adriana feels the familiar weight of lies settling on her shoulders. Everything is fine, she assures the teacher. We've had some changes in our routine, but we're adjusting. Right, mijo? Diego nods quickly, shoving his sketchbook into his backpack. Miss Sanchez doesn't look convinced, but she steps back with a practiced smile. Well, please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. That night, after a dinner of rice and beans that stretches their dwindling groceries, Adriana sits on the edge of Diego's bed with a worn copy of The Little Prince. The story is familiar to them both, a tale of courage and friendship that offers escape from their own reality. What makes the desert beautiful, Adriana reads softly, is that somewhere it hides a well. Diego's breathing deepens as he drifts towards sleep. Adriana watches his face relax, years of worry falling away. In these quiet moments, she allows herself to imagine a different life, one where they're truly safe, where Diego can draw his superheroes without hiding darker truths between the lines. Te amo, mi superhero, she whispers, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Tomorrow will bring another day of fear and pretense, but for now, in the gentle darkness of his room, Adriana lets herself believe in the possibility of escape. When Carlos's key turns in the lock an hour later, the sound shoots through Adriana like electricity. She straightens from where she's been washing dishes, her hands automatically checking that her phone is hidden in her pocket, her one connection to the outside world that he hasn't managed to control. His footsteps are uneven, and Adriana's heart rate spikes. He's been drinking again. The kitchen door swings open with too much force, bouncing against the wall. Carlos fills the door frame, his tie loosened and shirt wrinkled from a long day at the construction site. This place is a mess, he slurs, gesturing at the dishes soaking in the sink. What do you do all day? Adriana keeps her voice steady, neutral. I worked late tonight. The office needed extra cleaning for a morning meeting. Excuses. He moves closer, alcohol heavy on his breath. I give you everything. A home, safety, and you can't even keep it clean? The words hit their target with practiced precision. Adriana grips the edge of the sink, fighting the urge to step back. I'll finish now. That Diego needed help with homework, and... Diego, always Diego. Carlos's voice rises dangerously. You spoil him. He needs discipline, not your coddling. And you... His hand clamps around her upper arm. You need to remember who keeps you safe in this country. The threat hangs between them, familiar as a noose. Adriana forces herself to meet his eyes, to show just enough submission to diffuse his anger without completely surrendering. I remember, Carlos. I'm grateful. He releases her arm with a slight push that makes her stumble. Clean this up. I'm going to bed. Only when his footsteps fade and the bedroom door clicks shut does Adriana allow herself to shake. She touches her arm where his fingers left marks, knowing tomorrow's long sleeves will hide the evidence. In her pocket, her phone feels like a lifeline. Rosa's number stored under a fake contact name, the women's shelter website, bookmarked in an incognito browser. The dishes clatter softly as she washes them, her mind drifting to the small stash of money hidden inside an old coffee tin in the back of the pantry. It's not much. A few dollars saved from her cleaning jobs, quarters found in couch cushions, the occasional tip from the office workers who notice her existence. Not enough for an escape. Not yet, but soon. In the quiet kitchen, Adriana allows herself to dream of freedom. She imagines an apartment across town, small but safe. Diego could hang his drawings on the walls without fear. They could laugh without worrying about disturbing anyone. No more bruises to hide, no more threats hanging over their heads. But reality crashes back as she dries the last plate. Her status in this country is as fragile as the ceramic in her hands. One wrong move, one phone call from Carlos, and everything she's built for Diego could crumble. The American dream that lured her across the border has become a cage, with Carlos holding the key. Adriana checks the locks twice before heading to bed, though she knows the real threat isn't outside their apartment. Tomorrow she'll wake before dawn and do it all again. The careful dance of survival, the constant calculations of risk and safety. But tonight, in the darkness of their small kitchen, she allows herself to imagine breaking free. She pauses in Diego's doorway, watching his chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep. His sketchbook lies open beside him, pages filled with heroes who always win their battles. Adriana touches the hidden money in her pocket, feeling the weight of possibility against her palm. Soon, she whispers to her sleeping son. Soon we'll be strong enough to fly. The cookie tin feels heavier each time Adriana adds to it, weighted with both hope and fear. She counts the crumpled bills in the dim light of early morning. $217. Not enough, but growing. Each dollar represents a small act of rebellion, a skipped lunch, an extra hour of cleaning, loose change slipped into her pocket instead of the grocery fund. Carlos's moods darken with the autumn weather. His threats evolve from vague warnings to specific scenarios, detailed descriptions of immigration raids, of Diego being placed in foster care, of Adriana being sent back to Mexico alone. She recognizes the calculated cruelty in his words, the way he wraps threats in concern for her welfare. You're lucky to have me, he tells her over dinner, his voice carrying that dangerous edge that makes Diego shrink in his chair. Who else would protect you, keep you safe from La Migra? Diego retreats further into his art. His superheroes grow darker, their victories less certain. Adriana finds drawings stuffed under his mattress, scenes of violence rendered in harsh black strokes, a caped figure always standing between a monster and a small boy. When she asks about them, Diego just shrugs and turns away. He barely speaks in class anymore, Miss Sanchez tells her during another worried conference. When he does participate, his stories, they concern me. There's so much anger, so much fear. Adriana nods and makes empty promises about talking to him, knowing any conversation risks exposing their fragile reality. That night, she holds Diego closer during story time, breathing in the fading scent of his childhood. You can tell me anything, she whispers into his hair. Anything at all. But Diego just clutches his sketchbook tighter and burrows into her side. The breaking point comes on a Tuesday. Adriana returns from work to find Carlos waiting in the kitchen, her cookie tin on the table between his hands. The sight stops her cold in the doorway, keys still dangling from numb fingers. What is this? His voice is soft, almost gentle. That's how she knows the danger is real. Savings, she manages, for Diego's school supplies. Liar. He opens the tin, letting bills flutter to the table. You're planning to leave me, after everything I've done for you. Carlos, please. Please what? He stands, and Adriana instinctively steps back. Please forget that you're betraying me. Please ignore that you're teaching our son to be ungrateful. Papa? Diego's voice comes from behind Adriana, small and frightened. She hadn't heard him come home from the library. Carlos's face twists. Go to your room. This is between your mother and me. But Diego doesn't move. His hands grip his sketchbook like a shield. Leave her alone. Diego, go, Adriana pleads. It's okay. Everything's okay. Carlos laughs, the sound scraping against her nerves. Nothing's okay. Your mother's a traitor, planning to get herself deported, abandon you. No. Diego's shout surprises them all. You're the bad guy. You hurt her. I see it. I draw it. His voice breaks. Carlos moves faster than Adriana can react. He snatches Diego's sketchbook, ripping pages as he flips through them. His face darkens at the drawings, scene after scene of abuse captured in a child's unforgiving lines. This is what you teach him? Carlos hurls the book against the wall. To hate his father? Something snaps inside Adriana. She grabs Diego's hand and backs toward the door. We're leaving. You're not going anywhere. Carlos pulls out his phone. One call to ICE. Make it. Adriana's voice doesn't shake. Tell them everything. Tell them how you threaten a child. How you hurt his mother. See who they believe. She doesn't wait for his response. Clutching Diego's hand, she walks out of the apartment. Her cookie tin savings scatter across the floor behind them, but she doesn't look back. Some prices are worth paying. The women's shelter is housed in an unmarked building downtown, its windows covered with heavy curtains. Adriana hesitates at the entrance, her finger hovering over the buzzer. Diego squeezes her hand, and she finds the courage to press it. A woman with kind eyes opens the door. "I'm Maria," she says in Spanish, ushering them inside. "You're safe here." The words unlock something in Adriana's chest. Tears she's held back for years spill down her cheeks as Maria leads them to a small office. Another woman waits inside. Patricia Lopez, she introduces herself, a legal advocate who specializes in cases like Adriana's. "Have you heard of VAWA?" Patricia asks, sliding a tissue box across her desk. "The Violence Against Women Act?" Adriana shakes her head, wiping her eyes. "It's a law that can help you get legal status without Carlos's sponsorship," Patricia explains. "If we can prove the abuse, document the threats, there's a path forward. You don't have to choose between safety and staying in this country." Hope blooms in Adriana's chest, fragile but real. She looks at Diego, who has pulled out a wrinkled sheet of paper and begun to draw. This time, his superhero wears no cape or mask. She looks exactly like his mother. The bruise on Adriana's arm has faded to a sickly yellow, but she photographs it anyway. The morning light streaming through the shelter window catches each discolored shadow as she angles her phone camera. Behind her, Maria's voice is gentle but firm. "Everything must be documented," Maria says in Spanish, watching Adriana lower her sleeve. "Even the old injuries, they tell your story." Adriana's fingers tremble as she forwards the photos to Maria's secure email. Each image feels like a confession, the truth she's hidden beneath long sleeves and careful lies finally exposed. She pulls Diego's sketchbook from her bag, the pages dog-eared and smudged from frequent handling. "These two?" She opens to a particularly dark drawing. A hulking figure looms over a small boy and woman, its hands rendered in harsh, angry strokes. Maria nods, her eyes softening as she studies the image. Art therapy is often more honest than words, especially for children. Diego's drawings show what he couldn't say out loud. The shelter's office feels smaller today, crowded with the weight of evidence being assembled. Text messages screenshot and saved, hospital records from accidental falls, the careful documentation of Carlos's escalating threats. Each piece fits into a larger puzzle that Maria assures her will matter to the courts. "Your lawyer is here," Maria says, glancing at her phone. "Olivia Sanchez. She's young, but she understands cases like yours." The woman who enters carries herself with quiet confidence, her business suit a stark contrast to the shelter's worn furniture. "Mrs. Castillo," she says, extending her hand. "I'm Olivia. Maria has told me about your situation." Adriana straightens in her chair, conscious of her thrift store clothes and tired eyes. But Olivia's smile holds no judgment as she settles across the desk, spreading out papers covered in dense legal text. "The Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, can help you obtain legal status without Carlos's sponsorship," Olivia explains, her voice steady and clear. "But we need to prove two things: that your marriage was entered in good faith and that you've suffered abuse." The words "good faith" catch in Adriana's throat. "I loved him once," she whispers. "Before." "That's important," Olivia says, making a note. "We'll need to gather evidence of your genuine relationship, photos, joint accounts, anything that shows you built a life together before the abuse began." The meeting stretches on, each requirement feeling like another mountain to climb. Olivia explains the process with patient detail. Affidavits needed, forms to file, testimonies to gather. When Adriana's eyes glaze over, overwhelmed by the complexity, Olivia pauses. "I know it seems impossible," she says, leaning forward, "but you're stronger than you realize. We'll take it one step at a time." That evening, Adriana finds Diego curled on his shelter bed, tears streaking his cheeks. His sketchbook lies open beside him, pages wrinkled from dried droplets. "Mio?" She sits beside him, running gentle fingers through his hair. "What's wrong?" "I don't want to go back," he chokes out. "I don't want to live with him anymore. Please, Mama." The plea pierces Adriana's heart. She gathers Diego close, feeling his small frame shake with sobs. "Listen to me," she says, tilting his face up. "I promise you, we're going to fight, together, no matter what." But fear coils in her stomach later that night as Maria outlines the risks. "Carlos may try to discredit you," she warns. "Call your character into question. Use your status against you. Are you prepared for that?" Adriana thinks of Diego's tears, of the darkness in his drawings. "I have to be," she answers. The legal notice arrives 3 days later, Carlos's lawyer's letterhead stark against white paper. Full custody? It demands. Grounds of parental unfitness. Financial instability, immigration status pending. The words blur before Adriana's eyes as Olivia explains their meaning. He's moving faster than we expected, the lawyer says, frowning at the documents. But we can fight this. Your documented history as Diego's primary caregiver, his emotional attachment to you. The courtroom feels vast and cold, its wooden benches unyielding. Carlos sits across the aisle in an expensive suit, his lawyer a polished presence beside him. When he catches Adriana's eye, his smile holds familiar menace. His attorney paints a devastating picture. Adriana, the unstable mother, the illegal immigrant living on charity. Photos of the shelter are presented as evidence of her inability to provide. Each word lands like a physical blow, but Olivia rises with quiet determination. She speaks of Adriana's sacrifices, her unwavering devotion to Diego. Hospital records from Diego's childhood show every vaccination, every checkup, proof of a mother's constant care despite limited resources. The judge's ruling falls heavy in the silent courtroom. Temporary shared custody. Alternate weekends with Carlos while the court gathers evidence. Diego's fingers dig into Adriana's arm as the words sink in. It's not forever, Olivia whispers as they leave. It's just a step in the process. But that night, Diego's sobs echo through their shelter room. I don't want to go, he repeats, clinging to Adriana. He doesn't even like me. He just wants to hurt you. Adriana holds him close, swallowing her own tears. Be brave for me, she murmurs. Remember what you always draw? Heroes stay strong, even when they're scared. The first weekend exchange happens in the courthouse parking lot. Carlos's new apartment tower gleams in the distance as Diego drags his feet toward his father's car. His backpack bulges with art supplies, small comforts Adriana prays Carlos won't take away. When Diego returns Sunday night, his usual chatter is gone. He curls into himself on the shelter bed, mechanically answering Adriana's gentle questions. Yes, he ate. Yes, he slept. No, Papa didn't hurt him. But his sketchbook tells a different story. Dark figures crowd the pages, and one image stops Adriana's breath. A small boy trapped in a cage, a shadow looming outside. The pencil strokes are sharp, almost violent. He makes me study all the time, Diego finally whispers one night, says drawing is for babies, says I need to be more like him. The next exchange, Adriana can't stay silent. He's withdrawing, she tells Carlos as Diego trudges toward the car. He needs his art. It helps him process. Process what? Carlos's voice carries that dangerous softness. How you've filled his head with weakness. He needs discipline, structure, things you've failed to provide. I provide what he needs most, Adriana snaps. Love, safety, understanding. Carlos's laugh holds no warmth. And how long can you provide anything without papers? Without me? The words follow Adriana to Diego's parent-teacher conference, where Miss Lopez's concern mirrors her own. His artwork has changed, the teacher says, spreading out recent assignments. There's so much shadow, so much fear. This isn't like Diego. She hesitates, then pulls out a formal letter. I've documented the changes in his emotional state, his classroom participation. If it helps your case. Adriana clutches the letter, another piece of evidence for their growing file. But it's the next development that shifts everything. The woman arrives at the shelter on a Tuesday evening, her presence causing a stir among the staff. Isabella Martinez carries herself with quiet dignity, her story already known to the shelter workers, another survivor, here to share hope with others. But when her eyes meet Adriana's across the common room, recognition flashes. You're Carlos's wife, Isabella says softly, his current wife. The words hang between them, heavy with shared understanding. Over cups of cooling coffee, Isabella's story spills out. Her marriage to Carlos years ago, arranged for his green card. The careful facade of romance constructed for immigration officials, the way he discarded her once his status was secure. I was young, desperate for money, Isabella admits, shame coloring her voice. He promised to help my family back home. By the time I realized the kind of man he was, Adriana's hands shake around her cup. Why are you telling me this? Because I've carried this guilt for years. Isabella meets her eyes. My silence enabled him to hurt others, to hurt you and Diego, but I can help now. I have proof, emails, messages, documents that show the fraud. Hope rises in Adriana's chest, fragile but insistent. You'd testify? Yes. Isabella's voice holds steel. It's time someone stopped him. That night, Adriana watches Diego sleep, his face peaceful for the first time in weeks. The weight of Isabella's evidence sits in her phone, screenshots of damning messages, proof of Carlos's calculated manipulation. Tomorrow, she'll share them with Olivia, add them to their growing arsenal. But tonight, she allows herself to imagine victory. Not just survival, but freedom. A future where Diego can draw his heroes without fear, where shadows no longer loom at their edges. She touches the fading bruise on her arm, remembering Maria's words about documentation. Every mark tells a story. And finally, after so long in silence, their story will be heard. The fluorescent lights of Courtroom 304 cast harsh shadows across Adriana's hands as she watches Olivia Sanchez arrange documents on the prosecution table. Each paper represents a piece of her life laid bare: text messages, photographs, police reports. The evidence of her shame and survival spread out like playing cards in a losing game. Rosa shifts beside her on the hard wooden bench, her presence steady and grounding. "Respira, amiga," she whispers, squeezing Adriana's arm where fresh bruises hide beneath her carefully chosen long sleeves. Carlos sits 3 rows ahead with his lawyer, his broad shoulders wrapped in an expensive charcoal suit. He hasn't looked back once, but Adriana feels the weight of his presence like a stone in her chest. The bailiff's keys jingle as he moves to open the courtroom doors, and Adriana's heart stutters at each metallic click. Olivia rises, smoothing her navy blazer. Her heels click against the polished floor as she approaches the judge's bench. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence demonstrating a clear pattern of abuse and manipulation by the defendant, Carlos Alvarez." The first text message appears on the courtroom's projection screen. Carlos's words stark and threatening. "If you leave, I'll make one phone call. You'll never see Diego again." More messages follow, each one a snapshot of terror. Threats about immigration raids, foster care, deportation. Adriana forces herself to breathe as Olivia methodically builds her case. The photographs come next, bruises blooming like dark flowers across skin, each one dated and documented. "Miss Sanchez," Carlos's lawyer interrupts, rising from his seat. "These photos could have been caused by anything. My client works in construction. He's helped Mrs. Castillo move furniture, do home repairs." "The pattern and placement of these injuries," Olivia counters, "have been reviewed by Dr. Sarah Chen, whose expert testimony you'll find in Exhibit C. They are consistent with defensive wounds, Your Honor." Rosa takes the stand next, her voice steady as she describes what she's witnessed. Carlos appearing at the office without warning, checking Adriana's phone, controlling every aspect of her movements. She would flinch, Rosa says, if anyone came up behind her too quickly. She worked through lunch to avoid his calls. Carlos shifts in his seat, his jaw working beneath his cleanly shaved skin. His lawyer scribbles furiously on a legal pad, but Adriana barely notices. Her attention fixes on the courtroom doors as they open to admit a slim woman with shoulder-length black hair. Isabella Martinez walks to the witness stand with quiet dignity, her dark eyes meeting Carlos's for one brief, electric moment before she's sworn in. The courtroom falls silent as she begins to speak. "I met Carlos Alvarez in 2015, she says, her accent less pronounced than Adriana's. He offered me $10,000 to marry him so he could get his green card." A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Carlos's lawyer stands quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is irrelevant to the current proceedings." On the contrary, Olivia argues, it establishes a pattern of manipulation and fraud that directly relates to how Mr. Alvarez has treated Mrs. Castillo. He's used his immigration status to control and threaten her, while his own citizenship was obtained through deception. The judge considers for a moment, then nods. "I'll allow it. Continue, Miss Martinez." Isabella's testimony unspools like a dark thread, revealing Carlos's calculated nature. How he chose her because she was vulnerable, recently divorced with mounting medical bills. How he promised it would be simple, a business arrangement, but then began controlling her movements, her friendships, her finances. "When I tried to end the arrangement early," Isabella says, "he threatened to report me for marriage fraud, said he'd make sure I went to prison." She pauses, gathering strength. "I was trapped for 2 years until I finally got help from the same women's shelter that helped Mrs. Castillo." As Isabella speaks, Olivia moves to retrieve a large manila envelope from her table. Adriana recognizes it immediately. Diego's sketchbook pages, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Her throat tightens as Olivia begins displaying them on the projector. The first drawing shows a towering shadow figure looming over a small boy and woman. Diego's typically precise lines are jagged here, the shadow's edges bleeding into the paper like spilled ink. In the next, the same figures appear, but the shadow has claws that reach for the boy while the woman tries to shield him. These drawings, Olivia explains, were created by Diego Castillo, age 10. They represent his perspective on the domestic situation in his home. More artwork appears, the shadow figure throwing things, shouting with mouth full of sharp teeth, standing between the woman and a door marked "Escape." Each image pulses with fear and helplessness, Diego's emotional truth rendered in stark black and white. Your Honor, Carlos's lawyer stands again, his confidence visibly shaken. These drawings prove nothing. Children have active imaginations. Mrs. Castillo could have coached her son. The consistency and detail in these images, Olivia interrupts, along with their correlation to documented incidents of abuse, speak to their authenticity. We've had them reviewed by Dr. Margaret Wu, a child psychologist, who will testify to their significance. Carlos whispers furiously to his lawyer, his composed facade cracking. Adriana watches his hands clench and unclench, recognizing the gesture from countless nights of terror in their kitchen. When Diego enters the courtroom, Adriana's heart nearly stops. He looks so small approaching the witness stand, his favorite Spider-Man t-shirt peeking out beneath a borrowed blazer that's slightly too big. The child advocate, Miss Chen, walks beside him, offering quiet encouragement. Hello, Diego, Olivia says gently after he's sworn in. Thank you for being here today. Can you tell us about your drawings? Diego clutches his current sketchbook close to his chest, a shield against the courtroom's scrutiny. His eyes flicker to Carlos, then away. I draw what I see, he says quietly. What happens at home? And what happens at home, Diego? He swallows hard. Papa gets angry. He yells at Mama, says mean things, says he'll send her away if she doesn't do what he wants. Diego's voice grows stronger. When I visit him, he makes me follow all these rules, says drawing is a waste of time, says I need to be stronger, but his chin trembles. But Mama says being strong means protecting people you love, not hurting them. Tears slip down Adriana's cheeks as her son speaks his truth. Beside her, Rosa presses a tissue into her hand. The judge leans forward slightly, his expression softening as he studies Diego. Your drawings show a lot of fear, Olivia continues carefully. Can you tell us about that? Diego nods, his fingers tracing the edge of his sketchbook. I'm scared he'll hurt Mama again, or that she'll disappear one day because of his phone call. I try to be brave, but... He looks directly at Adriana now, his eyes wet but determined. I want to stay with Mama. She makes me feel safe. The courtroom falls silent after Diego's testimony. Even the usual shuffle of papers and whispered conversations cease, as if the raw honesty of a child's pain has stunned everyone into stillness. The judge removes his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Given the severity of these allegations and the obvious emotional impact on the minor child, he says finally, I'm ordering psychological evaluations for both Mr. Alvarez and Diego. We'll need to fully assess the effects of this situation on the child's well-being. Carlos surges to his feet. This is ridiculous. I'm his father. Mr. Alvarez, the judge's voice cuts through the outburst, I suggest you control yourself or you'll be held in contempt. Outside the courtroom, reporters gather like moths around a flame, drawn by the shocking testimony about Carlos's fraudulent marriage. Adriana catches fragments of their conversations. Prominent businessman, immigration fraud, domestic abuse allegations. The carefully constructed image Carlos has built begins to crumble under the weight of truth. Olivia guides them through a side exit, shielding Diego from the cameras and questions. In the quiet hallway, Adriana kneels to embrace her son, breathing in the familiar scent of graphite and childhood that clings to his clothes. You were so brave, mi amor, she whispers against his hair. So brave. Diego hugs her fiercely, his small frame trembling with released tension. Like a superhero? Yes. Adriana pulls back to meet his eyes, seeing in them a mirror of her own growing strength. Exactly like a superhero. The psychological evaluation order feels both like a victory and a new challenge. More scrutiny, more questions, more opportunities for Diego's wounds to be examined. But as Adriana watches her son pull out his sketchbook and begin drawing, this time with lighter strokes, hints of color creeping back into his work, she feels something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, she realizes. For the first time since she can remember, hope feels less like a dangerous dream and more like a possibility taking shape beneath her son's careful hands. "We're not finished," Olivia warns as they prepare to leave. "Carlos won't give up easily." Adriana nods, her spine straightening as she gathers her purse and Diego's backpack. Neither will we. The late afternoon sun slants through the courthouse windows, painting long shadows across the marble floors. Outside, the media frenzy intensifies. Local news vans crowd the courthouse parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal sunflowers. Reporters cluster in groups, their voices carrying fragments of the day's revelations. Prominent businessman involved in marriage fraud, allegations of systematic abuse, immigration status used as weapon. Adriana glimpses Carlos being escorted to his car, his lawyer attempting to shield him from cameras with an opened briefcase. His carefully curated image as a successful businessman, the pressed suits, the charitable donations, the Chamber of Commerce meetings, crumbles under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. On her phone, notifications pop up from the local Hispanic community groups, messages of support, offers of help, women sharing similar stories of abuse and survival. The weight of fear that has pressed against her chest for so long begins to lift, replaced by something lighter, stronger. Rosa was right. She isn't alone. Other women have walked this path before her, have faced down their own monsters and emerged victorious. Their strength flows into her now, a river of solidarity and courage. Adriana walks tall through the courthouse shadows, her son's hand warm in hers. For the first time, she feels not just like Diego's protector, but like a warrior in her own right. Each step carries them closer to freedom, and she's finally ready to claim it. The fluorescent lights of the office building flicker as Adriana pushes her cleaning cart down the empty hallway. It's past 9, and her shoulders ache from the extra shift she picked up. The cart's wobbly wheel squeaks against the polished floor, a sound that would normally drive her crazy, but tonight she barely notices it. Her mind is fixed on the number growing in her bank account, proof that she can provide for Diego on her own. "You're still here?" Rosa's voice echoes from the break room. She emerges with her coat already on, keys jingling in her hand. "Adriana, this is the 3rd late shift this week. The night supervisor needed help." Adriana keeps her eyes on the streak of dirt she's scrubbing from the baseboard. "Time and a half pays better than sleeping?" Rosa crouches beside her, blocking her path to the next section of wall. "You look exhausted, amiga." Adriana sits back on her heels, letting the cleaning rag drop to her lap. The chemical smell of bleach burns her nose. "I need to show the court I can support Diego. Carlos's lawyer keeps talking about my limited income potential." The words taste bitter in her mouth. Rosa's face softens. "Come to church with me on Sunday. The women's group has been collecting school supplies for Diego. Monica's son outgrew all his winter clothes, nice ones, barely used. They want to help." Tears prick at Adriana's eyes. She blinks them back, focusing on the steady hum of the building's heating system. "I can't accept." "You can, and you will." Rosa grabs Adriana's hands, pulling her to her feet. "Let people care about you. It makes your case stronger, showing you have support." The word support echoes in Adriana's mind as she finally leaves the building 2 hours later. Her phone buzzes with a text from Maria at the shelter. "Group meeting tomorrow. Isabella has new information about Carlos." The next morning, Adriana arrives early at Olivia's office, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she can't afford but desperately needs. Isabella Martinez paces the small room, her heels clicking against the worn carpet. The sight of Carlos's first wife still unsettles Adriana. They share the same haunted look, the same habit of checking exits. "I found these." Isabella slides a manila envelope across Olivia's desk. "Emails from when we were married, bank statements showing how he controlled every penny. The pattern is exactly the same, the threats, the manipulation using immigration status as a weapon." Olivia spreads the documents across her desk, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "This is good, very good. It establishes a history of behavior that predates his relationship with Adriana." "He hasn't changed." Isabella's voice cracks. When I saw Diego's drawings in court, it was like looking at my own diary from back then. The same monster, just a different victim. That afternoon, Adriana sits in a circle of plastic chairs at the women's shelter, listening to stories that mirror her own. A woman named Sarah describes hiding money in tampon boxes. Jennifer talks about memorizing police scanner codes to know when ICE raids might happen. Each story builds something inside Adriana. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. Something with teeth. You're fighting for more than just yourself, Maria reminds them, her dark eyes moving from face to face. Every woman who breaks free makes it easier for the next one. Adriana thinks of Diego's latest drawing, tucked safely in her purse. His superhero wears her face now, standing tall against shadowy figures. He's learning to see her strength. She needs to keep showing it to him. The moment shatters 3 days later in courtroom 4B. Carlos's lawyer stands, a sheet of paper held like a weapon in his manicured hand. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Castillo entered this country illegally and has been working without proper documentation. The lawyer's voice carries artificial concern. Given her precarious legal status and limited financial means, we question her ability to provide a stable environment for the minor child. The words hit Adriana like physical blows. She feels the stares of everyone in the courtroom, the clerk pausing in her typing, the bailiff shifting his weight, the judge's eyes narrowing behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her throat closes up. The room tilts. Under the table, Olivia squeezes her hand. Breathe, she whispers. Just breathe. Later, in the shelter's kitchen, Adriana can't stop her hands from shaking as she makes tea she doesn't want. Diego sits at the scratch table, his pencil moving across paper with fierce concentration. Mommy. He pushes the drawing toward her. Look. The figure on the page wears her work uniform like armor, a cape made from her cleaning rag. She stands between a cowering child and a looming shadow, her stance protective and fierce. Is that me? Her voice comes out rough. Diego nods. You're stronger than him, even when you're scared. Isabella appears in the doorway, her own cup of tea going cold in her hands. He's right, you know. I let Carlos's threats paralyze me. But you're fighting back. That takes real courage. The sound of Olivia's heels against linoleum interrupts the moment. She bustles in, legal papers spilling from her arms. Adriana, listen to me. Your immigration status doesn't negate your rights as a mother. The Violence Against Women Act exists specifically for cases like yours. She spreads the documents across the table, covering Diego's drawings. We can file for protected status based on the abuse. More importantly, we can show that Carlos used your status to control you, that his concern for Diego's welfare is a smokescreen for continued manipulation. Hope flutters in Adriana's chest, fragile as tissue paper. You really think... I think we focus on Carlos's unfitness as a parent, his history of emotional abuse, his use of Diego as a pawn. Olivia's voice hardens. Let him explain to the judge why terrorizing his son's mother makes him the better choice for custody. The psychological evaluation happens on a Tuesday. Adriana watches Diego disappear into Dr. Chen's office, his sketchbook clutched to his chest like a shield. The hour crawls by as she sits in the waiting room, counting water stains on the ceiling tiles. When Carlos arrives for his session, he barely glances at her, but she catches the way his jaw tightens, the slight tremor in his hands as he fills out the intake forms. He's nervous. The realization hits her like a surge of electricity. Dr. Chen's report arrives a week later, its clinical language masking emotional bombs. Carlos's controlling behavior stems from his own childhood trauma, a father who demanded perfection, who used shame as a teaching tool. The report paints him as a man repeating toxic patterns rather than a calculating abuser. This complicates things, Olivia admits, running her highlighter over key passages. The judge will want to consider rehabilitation options, family counseling. No. The word comes out sharper than Adriana intends. She moderates her tone. Understanding why he hurts us doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make him safe for Diego. She thinks of her son's drawings, the way the shadowy monster grows larger on each page, the way Diego flinches when doors slam, the way he checks her face each morning looking for new bruises to add to his artistic record of their pain. Understanding floods her chest, not warm like hope, but cool and clear as mountain water. Carlos's trauma might explain his actions, but it will never excuse them. The cycle of abuse ends here, with her decision to break it. She pulls Diego's latest drawing from her bag, smoothing the crumpled paper on Olivia's desk. The superhero version of herself stands tall, unafraid of shadows. It's time to live up to that image. We use this, she says, touching the paper gently. We show the judge that understanding Carlos's pain doesn't mean letting him inflict it on others, that breaking the cycle starts with protecting those who can't protect themselves. Olivia studies her face, then nods slowly. Okay, we build our case around Diego's emotional well-being, show how Carlos's unresolved trauma creates an unsafe environment. She starts making notes, her pen scratching against legal paper. We'll need to prepare you for direct confrontation in court. Are you ready for that? Adriana looks at the drawing again, at the strength her son sees in her. Yes, she says, and this time her voice doesn't shake at all. I'm ready. The fluorescent lights of the women's shelter cast harsh shadows across the scattered papers on the table. Adriana's fingers trace the edge of Diego's most recent drawing, a figure that looks like her, standing tall against a dark shape in the background. She slides it into the growing stack of evidence, her hand lingering on the page. Everything is here, Olivia says, her voice steady and reassuring. She taps each pile methodically. Diego's artwork, the psychologist's evaluation, Isabella's sworn statement about the marriage fraud, Carlos's emails. The lawyer's eyes meet Adriana's. We've built a strong case. Adriana nods, but anxiety coils in her stomach. Tomorrow's hearing looms before her like a mountain she must climb. The shelter's common room feels both too small and too large, the weight of everything they've gathered pressing against her chest. What if? She starts, but Olivia cuts her off with a gentle shake of her head. No what ifs. Stay focused on what we know. She pulls out a fresh legal pad. Let's work on your statement for the court. The night deepens around them as Adriana searches for words. The blank page before her seems to mock her efforts until finally the truth begins to flow. Your Honor, I came to this country carrying nothing but hope and the dream of a better life for my child. Diego was born into a world where his mother lived in shadows, always afraid. But even in darkness, a mother's love burns bright. Her pen moves faster now, recording memories that pierce her heart. Diego's first steps in their tiny apartment, his early drawings taped proudly to their refrigerator, the way he would crawl into her lap during thunderstorms. She writes about the nights she held him while Carlos raged, about watching her bright, creative boy slowly withdraw into silence. I am not asking for wealth or status. I ask only for the chance to give my son what every child deserves, a home free from fear, a place where his art can flourish without having to hide the truth it reveals. The shelter grows quiet around her as other residents settle in for the night. In the silence, Adriana hears Diego's soft breathing from the nearby common room where he's fallen asleep on the worn couch, his latest sketchbook clutched to his chest. She crosses the room quietly, kneeling beside him. His face looks younger in sleep, the worry lines smoothed away. New drawings peek from his sketchbook, page after page of the same figure, a mother hero who stands between danger and her child. The sight brings fresh tears to Adriana's eyes. Mio, she whispers, brushing his hair back from his forehead. My brave boy. Diego stirs, blinking up at her. Mama, is it time? Not yet, mi amor. Soon. She helps him sit up, noting how he automatically checks the room for threats before relaxing. Show me what you've been drawing? His face brightens as he opens the sketchbook. See? She's fighting the shadows, and they can't touch her anymore. She's too strong now. His finger traces the bold lines. Like you. Adriana's throat tightens. Diego? I know you're scared, he interrupts, his voice small but fierce. But you're braver than any superhero. You'll win tomorrow. I know you will. She pulls him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo mixed with colored pencil shavings. In this moment, she finds the strength she needs, not in legal documents or witness statements, but in the unwavering faith of her child. A knock at the door startles them both. Isabella Martinez stands in the doorway, her presence a reminder of how far they've come. The woman who once shared Carlos's last name now stands as their strongest ally. I wanted to check on you before tomorrow, Isabella says, settling into a chair nearby. Her eyes are kind but determined. You know this isn't just about Diego anymore, right? Every woman trapped by men like Carlos, your story gives them hope. Adriana thinks of the other shelter residents she's met, their stories echoing her own. Women caught between abuse and deportation, their children's futures hanging by threads woven from fear. I never wanted to be an example, she admits. I just wanted to keep my son safe. That's exactly why you're inspiring them, Isabella says softly. You're showing them that a mother's love is stronger than any threat, any fear. She reaches across the table, squeezing Adriana's hand. Tomorrow you'll show Carlos too. The courthouse looms gray and imposing in the morning light. Adriana straightens her borrowed blazer, feeling the weight of her personal statement in the pocket. Diego's hand is warm in hers as they climb the steps, Olivia and Isabella flanking them like guards. Inside the courtroom, Carlos sits with his lawyer, his appearance as polished as ever. But something has shifted. The sight of him no longer makes Adriana's heart race with fear. Instead, she sees him clearly, a man whose own trauma has twisted into a weapon he uses against others. Olivia rises for her opening argument, her voice filling the courtroom with quiet authority. She weaves together the evidence of their lives, Diego's artwork telling stories his voice couldn't, the psychologist's careful documentation of trauma, Isabella's testimony revealing the pattern of manipulation that has spanned years. Your Honor, Olivia concludes, this case isn't about immigration status or financial resources. It's about a child's right to grow up without fear and a mother's right to protect her son from the very person who should be helping to keep him safe. Carlos's lawyer attempts to paint a different picture, one of stability and structure, of a father's right to discipline and guide. But when Carlos takes the stand, his carefully constructed facade begins to crack under Olivia's questioning. Mr. Alvarez, can you explain these emails? Olivia holds up printed screenshots. The ones where you threatened to have your wife deported if she didn't comply with your demands? I was protecting my family. Carlos snaps, his composure slipping. Someone has to maintain order. Order? Olivia's voice remains calm. Is that what you call making a child so afraid that he can only express himself through drawings of monsters threatening his mother? Carlos's face darkens. Diego needs a father's guidance. Adriana coddles him, lets him waste time with this art nonsense. Objection, Your Honor, his lawyer interrupts, but the damage is done. The judge's expression has shifted, seeing past Carlos's respectable exterior to the control that drives him. When Isabella takes the stand, her testimony falls like hammer blows on the last of Carlos's credibility. She describes their fraudulent marriage in detail, how he convinced her to help him get his green card, promising love and security only to discard her once his status was secured. I recognized his tactics as soon as I met Adriana, Isabella tells the court. The same threats, the same manipulation, but this time there was a child involved, and I couldn't stay silent. The moment Adriana dreads most comes next, her own testimony. But as she takes the stand, she finds her fear transforming into something else. The words of her prepared statement fall away, and instead she speaks directly to Carlos. I know you had a hard life, she says, meeting his eyes for the first time in months. I know your father taught you that love means control, that fear keeps people close, but look at what it's doing to our son. She gestures to Diego's drawings displayed on boards for the court to see. Look at how he sees his world, full of shadows and monsters wearing his father's face. Carlos flinches, and for a moment, Adriana glimpses the wounded child behind his anger. I never. He starts, then falls silent. We can break this cycle. Adriana continues, her voice gaining strength. Let Diego grow up knowing that strength doesn't mean making others afraid. Let him see that love is bigger than power. The courtroom falls silent as her words hang in the air. Even the judge seems moved, studying the evidence before him with new eyes. After what feels like hours, he clears his throat. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court finds in favor of the petitioner, Adriana Castillo. Full custody of Diego Castillo is hereby granted to his mother, with Mr. Alvarez's visitation rights suspended pending completion of court-mandated therapy. The judge's gavel falls like a period at the end of a long sentence. Adriana barely registers the rest of his words. Something about investigating Carlos's immigration fraud, about recommendations for support services. All she can feel is Diego's arms around her waist, his face pressed against her side as tears of relief soak into her borrowed blazer. Later, back at the shelter, Olivia arrives with more news that makes Adriana's knees weak. Her VAWA petition has been approved. The papers in Olivia's hands promise something Adriana has dreamed of for years: legal residency, the right to live and work without fear of deportation. What happens now? Diego asks, looking up from his latest drawing. This one shows his mother hero standing in sunlight, no shadows in sight. Adriana pulls him close, her heart full of possibilities. Now, mi amor, we fly. The months that follow bring changes both big and small. Adriana starts volunteering at the shelter, sharing her story with other women trapped between abuse and deportation. She learns the legal terms in both English and Spanish, helps others navigate the system that once terrified her. Diego's art evolves too. His new comic series features a diverse cast of heroes, mothers and children who help each other escape darkness, who build new lives in the light. His teacher reports that he's speaking up in class again, making friends, letting his natural creativity shine. One evening, Adriana stands before a room full of women at a shelter event. Many of them wear the same haunted look she once carried, but there's hope in their eyes as she speaks. I used to think strength meant enduring, she tells them. Now I know it means choosing. Choosing to believe in yourself. Choosing to fight for your children. Choosing to break free. From his seat in the back, Diego adds another detail to his latest drawing. A golden sun rising behind his mother hero, its rays touching every corner of the page, leaving no room for shadows to hide. Thank you so much for watching and listening to our story. Your time and support mean the world to us. If this video resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Your engagement helps us grow and continue sharing meaningful stories. See you in the next video.